Welcome to another solo episode. I'm your host, Ryan Richards. I'm a residential loan officer based here in New England, an active real estate investor throughout Massachusetts and Rhode Island as well. Today, I'm excited to bring you a fun solo episode, a little bit different than what we typically do. We're not going to talk as much about real estate, but we are going to talk about some of the most impactful books that I am currently reading or have read that I feel like you might take some interest in. So hopefully you find some of the topics that I talk about valuable, and maybe you read the same book and find the same. Let me know in the comments, or feel free to reach out and talk a little bit about it. So when I talk about reading books, I don't actually read the book. I listen to it on audiobooks, which doesn't really matter either here nor there. But I think it's interesting to look back in time at the books that I read at certain points in my career, because they're very reflective of like what my mindset was like. And I really try to pick books that help me overcome a certain challenge I'm having or a certain mindset shift that I need to accomplish. So over time, I look back at the library, and it is really interesting to see where I've come and what books I'm reading in alignment with where I'm trying to go. And the book that I'm currently reading is called Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell, which is an awesome book. I'm like 75% of the way through. I've listened to Dan on podcasts, and he's been on so many different social media platforms and talking about buying back your time and the concept around how to hire employees to get your time back and scale your business. And I think this book's been really tactical, which is very hard to find in books about entrepreneurship. It tends to be a lot of theory, a lot of motivation. You should work really hard and be really consistent, which is important. But give me something to take away from this that I can go do and implement. And this book is really good at that. How to Buy Back Your Time talks about this theory called your buyback rate. And basically it talks about when you own your own business, you should have a calculatable number that you can put to what your time is worth to delegate to someone else. And basically that cost is 25% of your hourly wage. So let's say, for example, you make $250,000. You could boil that down to about, we'll say $20,000 a month or about $5,000 a week. So if you work 40 hours a week, your buyback rate is about $120 an hour. So 25% of $120 an hour would be $30 an hour. So your buyback rate is $30 an hour. So any task that you do in your business that you can offload to someone else and pay them $30 or less an hour is worth the investment, because that will free you up to then go do more $120 an hour tasks. So you can go sell more if that's your role in your business. You can go focus on other key hires. You can work on marketing, growth, social media, strategy, whatever your highest dollar value tasks are that you need to do. Starts with understanding what tasks you are worth more than, what tasks you need to be able to delegate in order to grow your business. And it gives you a very calculatable formula to use, and something that I've actually took to analyze my business. And he actually even goes further in giving you a way to analyze your calendar currently. Look at the past few weeks of your calendar, go through your entire day and rank your tasks based on value. What's the expected outcome? What are the highest ROI tasks you can do? How much are you going to make by doing that task? Or is it more administrative? So he has you rank these and actually do a schedule audit, which has been super important. And he talks about that theory of if you can use the buyback rate to offload your lowest value tasks. The essence of the book says you're 4 hires away from having a business that runs itself and grows on its own. So, one of the biggest pitfalls he talks about is the idea that most entrepreneurs, they first try to hire to grow their business. But instead, you should hire to buy back your time. So rather than being at a point where you're really busy and you hire another salesperson, first hire an administrative assistant to take away all of the low value tasks. So if you're a CEO of a business, his idea is you shouldn't really be checking your emails. They should be filtered and only the high value emails should go to you. You shouldn't be dealing with, reading the mail, looking at your notes payable, have an accounting person, have someone who schedules out your calendar, manages your day-to-day, manages your promotions, manages your events, your schedule. have someone who does all of that for you so you can focus on the higher value tasks like selling, closing deals, making more money. I think it's really important. So definitely recommend that book, Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. Definitely a great read. Another book that I've read in the past that was honestly one of the best books I've ever read, not really specific to one thing, but definitely centered around mindset and personal development. I just think the way this story was told and the details of this person's life were just truly something that is indescribable until you read it. And that's Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. Now, David Goggins gets portrayed on social media as this tougher than life alpha male, which is not really the case. I mean, if you listen to his book, it's the mindset that he curated to deal with pushing himself to be better. And obviously on social media, being extreme about his sales, right? That's all part of business. So understanding that, you're able to see past that image of him in the book, but he really is that dude. He is, to a core, one of the baddest, as he calls it, baddest mother in the world. And he lives that lifestyle. And I think the book really talks about ways to overcome adversity, talk about how to frame your mindset, and how to push yourself to boundaries that you didn't think were possible. That's really the essence of his story. He believes that your brain, the human brain, stops you 60% before you're done. So 60% out of your total 100 is being used because your brain stops you with a mental barrier. And obviously he proves this by pushing himself to incredible physical feats, running 100, 200 mile marathons and rucks. He did Navy SEALs training with broken legs and all these crazy stories that don't even sound real till you hear the book. But talks about how to frame your mindset to be able to overcome what you see as your maximum output. I just think it was really important. And his story was just very well put together. I took a lot from it and just learned a lot more about a really interesting character. So definitely recommend that. I would recommend getting that in the audiobook, because in the audiobook, he actually takes a segment in between chapters to do a quick podcast and talk about the chapter, his experiences, and elaborate a little bit more. So it was really a full experience. Definitely recommend Can't Hurt Me if you just wanted a different read. But one really tactical book that I think, if you're interested in real estate investing, and I always say we're not going to talk about it, but we have to, because it's the best wealth building vehicle of all time. And it's the whole nature of my podcast. It's in the names. We have to talk about it. But that book is called The Book on Managing Rental Property by Brandon Turner. When I say tactical, step-by-step advice for managing, operating, owning, becoming better at rental real estate, this book is it through and through. You can buy this book and highlight stuff and go back to it. It's a reference guide for almost every step of the process. And it teaches you how to be a good landlord, like what you should think about, how landlord-tenant relationships work best, and just gets really, really in the fine details of how to do it. So screening tenants, how to communicate with tenants, how to create that landlord-tenant relationship, be firm but fair. That's Brandon Turner saying, at least as far as I understand it. And he has a lot of those great takeaway points that I still reference back to when I'm going through, my management process. Those principles are things that I always reference because, Brandon Turner owns $1 billion in real estate, a couple thousand doors. So he knows what he's doing. And it just was a really well-written book that walks you through how to manage and own rental property. So very tactical book. If you wanted some tactical pieces to take away, highly recommend checking that out. And he goes into really great detail of screening tenants, which I think is something that a lot of landlords miss. They just put a tenant in there, someone who is going to pay them the rent. They move in quickly. They can save time. They're easy. But sometimes those are the tenants that don't pay. And how do you figure out who's going to pay in a sea of people? Now, here's a lot of great tips for interview questions when you're talking with tenants, understanding how they think and how they present, reading them as a person. Do they show up in pajamas and a sweatshirt to your showing on Saturday morning, and are they late past the time? Take a look by their car. Is their car full of stuff? Do they treat their car well? Because they don't treat their car well, they're probably not going to treat your apartment well. So he gives you a lot of those unique tactical tips that I think are really important, which listening to this, how I keep my car and how I keep my house are definitely not the same. So I wouldn't be a good example for that, but he does give you very tactical advice and things to implement and put action items in place so you can start to really see results. And I think that's very hard to find in a book. And that has been one of my favorites by far. All of the Brandon Turner books are great. How to Invest in Real Estate with Low and No Money Down. Awesome book for understanding a little bit more about the financing process, some type of program options you have. The Mindset Behind the Millionaire Real Estate Investor, great book. I think I butchered that name a little bit, but it's going off the cuff here. It's just around that title, Millionaire Mindset. Awesome book. So he's got a lot of great pieces out. Obviously his podcasts, stories online, find him on social media, a lot of great stuff there. Highly recommend those 3 books. One other book that I've been getting into, not real estate specific, but just an awesome, notorious best-selling book, is Never Split the Difference. Really focuses on negotiation, and it tells a lot of stories of FBI interrogators, high stakes hostage interrogators, and how they frame conversations to ultimately get people to talk and say what they need them to say. So it's really great for sales professionals, anyone in the real estate space, if you're an agent, or if you just want to learn more about behind the scenes of some really cool high stakes hostage negotiations. It's just a very interesting way of learning about sales versus in your typical classroom setting. So highly recommend that. Very tactical, talks about how to use mirroring, posing questions in certain ways, leading into certain questions in certain ways to be able to build trust with whoever you're talking to and ultimately get the outcome you're desiring. So does it in a really fun way. A lot of the stories are very entertaining, and I found a lot of use of it. So hopefully it continues to pay dividends, and so far I'm enjoying it. So hopefully you took something from this episode. Solo episode I'm filming on Friday the 27th at 4:30. It's been a long day filming, and hopefully found some value in this episode.